Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the movie Challengers that is currently out in theaters. I thought that this movie was really good. Let's talk about it.
Modern movie review.
Okay, so right off the bat, I do want to go ahead and issue a spoiler warning as I do with all of my videos. This was a movie that I really liked. I thought that I got into a lot of really deep concepts that I wasn't fully ready for, and I really enjoyed this movie, so there is a chance that I might potentially spoil it or say something that could potentially ruin the viewing experience for you. So if you have not seen the movie, you might want to save this video for later and come back and watch it. Or if you are okay with sticking around, we're going to go ahead and dive really deep into this. Okay, so first off, I do kind of want to talk about the fact that this is a sports movie, and as somebody who has never really been a fan of the sports genre, like, I'm gonna be totally honest, Moneyball was getting a bunch of hype a couple of months ago, and I watched it, and I was like, well, this is okay. And then there's another couple of, like, really big sports movies that every time I watch it, I'm like, yeah, this is pretty cool, but, like, for the most part, I don't think I vibe with sports movies that much, and I think part of it is, back when I was younger, I was an athlete, and I feel like a lot of these sports movies don't do a really good job of fully, like, diving into the mindset of an athlete. I think Tonya is a movie that does it really well. I think the movie McFarlane USA is one that does a pretty good job with it. But other than that, there's a lot of sports movies that I feel like don't do a perfect job of, like, showcasing how important a person's relationship with their sport is, because I think that that's a really big thing. If you're going to be making a sports movie, you really have to know this player, what makes them a player of that specific sport. Like, I personally wasn't really into tennis. I have played it from time to time, but watching this movie, each of these characters feel like somebody who would actually play tennis. They seem like somebody who's actually passionate about it, somebody who's potentially been playing tennis since they were kids, and I think that they do a really great job of showing that in this movie, and I really like that. So if you're a fan of sports movies and you are looking at the trailers for this and you're like, it looks like it's going to get into some darker stuff, I don't know if I'll really like it, at the end of the day, this is a tennis movie, and I think that the way that it portrays tennis being played and the way that it kind of does an interesting job of kind of transcending just playing the game of tennis and showcasing how, like, two people who truly have a love of the sport will come together every time they play a tennis match. It's really interesting, and I really liked it, and I was a really big fan of the sports elements in here. So what I want to say essentially is, of all of the sports movies I've ever seen, this is probably top 3. I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was great. I definitely think a lot of people should go out and check it out. But that being said, this movie is rated R, and it is rated R for nudity, a lot of, like, sexual intercourse, a lot of foul language and stuff like that. And I definitely think that this is a movie that you should be cautious about. Make sure you do your research before you go into it. Try to figure out, you know, what kind of scenes there's going to be, if there's certain things that would potentially disturb you. I had a friend today ask me, hey, are there any good movies in theaters? What movie should I watch? And I almost told him to go watch this movie. And I realized he was going to go watch it with his family. This is probably not a movie you want to watch with your family. There is a lot of making out. There's a lot of really like, interesting, like, scenes, and I'm gonna get more into that in a little bit, but overall, this movie is rated R, and if you have seen the trailer and you see, like, there's sequences where it seems like there's gonna be threesomes and stuff like that, this movie does an interesting job of kind of, like, addressing the kind of, like, throuple situation that's kind of going on here, and I really like the way that they do it. So for one, this is a sports movie. I've mentioned that probably like 7 times already. I'm so sorry. But specifically, the sport that it's about is tennis, and it is a sport between one player and another player, and them sharing the court together and having this bond. Because one thing that's really interesting about tennis, as opposed to a lot of other sports, is they are intentionally, like, sharing the playing field, and they're giving each other space, and they're hitting the ball back and forth from each other. And there's, like, a constant back and forth here. I feel like one of the only other sports that's like that is boxing, but boxing is definitely not one that I feel like you have this same intimacy with. And I really like the way that they kind of showcase that, like, the people who are on the tennis court together have this kind of, like, relationship with each other while they're playing in the match. And I think early on in the film, Zendaya's character has a, like, moment where she kind of explains exactly the feeling perfectly. But she talks about how, like, when she is playing tennis, it's more than just a sport. And I think that she calls out one of the two guys, and she's just like, you're not really a tennis player. You're just somebody who's going around hitting a ball with a racket. And she talks about, for her, what tennis means is being able to share an intimate moment with the person she's playing against. It's like, for a moment in time, instead of them actually just being two people who are hitting a ball with a racket, they kind of, like, transcend from that. They go from, instead of just being two people on a tennis court hitting a ball back and forth, it's kind of like more than that for them. It's kind of like when you fall in love with somebody and the entire like room disappears and it's just you and them sharing a very, very intimate moment. And the way that Zendaya's character talks about it is fantastic. And I think as somebody who has played a lot of sports, I can attest for the fact that like sometimes when you get really into it, it is a very beautiful moment, and it's easy to forget that there is anything other than just the sport that you were playing. And I really, really like the way that they showcase how passionate and how into this sport they are. Each of these players are people who are in it for the love of the game and not just for some money or some sponsor dealerships and stuff like that, which was something I was worried about with this movie. I think that a lot of the trailers have kind of like showcased like the two guys kind of fighting over Zendaya because they're like, well, she would be a really good like marketing thing, and you know, she's going to make a bunch of money and she's going to have a deal with like Adidas and stuff like that, and she could get us rich. And I was like really concerned that that was the route they were going through with this movie, and that's not it at all, which I'm really, really excited for, and I'm really, really grateful for, because that would not have been as interesting of a movie to me as this was. So I'm kind of gonna break down the layout of this movie, because I think that that's going to be one of the like coolest takeaways from it, and I think that a lot of like heavy film bros are probably talking about this, and it's probably part of the reason why a lot of them have given this movie 5 stars. But I love the fact that this entire movie takes place over a match of tennis between the oldest versions of our two main characters, the main protagonist and antagonist, and I feel like they could kind of go either way. But Mike Fast's character, is it pronounced Fast? I looked it up, and like there was a audio like pronunciation video that kind of pronounced it like feast, but I'm like, I thought it was Mike Fast or Faced or something like that. But either way, the character that he plays and the character that Josh O'Connor plays, they were lifelong friends, and they've been playing tennis together since they were like 10 years old or something like that, and they've always been like brothers, right? And this movie takes place at the very, very end of the overall story, and it's a tennis match between them, and you can tell that there's like a lot of tension between the two. There's a lot of like unspoken kind of conflict that you can really feel like they're like coming to a boiling point here while they're like pissed at each other. And the movie is interwoven through flashback sequences where we see where they first were starting to play tennis together, and when they first won like their first really big like juniors tournaments and stuff like that, and they won a duos contest together, and then they met Zendaya's character, and then some of the stuff with them falling in love with her and then falling out of love with her, and a lot of really complicated stuff with their relationship. And the way that it's all takes place during this one match of tennis, but like we'll see like the first round go, and then you know they do their back and forth, one person wins, and then they take a break for, you know, in between sets, and then we'll see more of the past story, and then it keeps going and going and going until we finally get to the final match where winner takes all. Everything's all tied up, very, very dramatic moments, and I love it. It's fantastic. I think that this movie is like masterfully written. Every single moment in this movie I feel like is important and necessary, and you have to watch the entire movie to get everything, because almost every single sequence that is happening in the past has a direct correlation in the future, and it does a really interesting job of showcasing how even like the littlest moments in their past together is something that comes back during this match that they're having. And I think that that's something that this movie does incredibly well, is the foreshadowing is on point, and the storytelling is just absolutely beautiful. I really, really love the fact that they have some like kind of like inside jokes, or they have like some secret codes and messages to like talk to each other while they're playing the game of tennis. And like during the final act, there are some sequences where they're having full-on conversations, and there's not a single word that's actually being spoken. We're just seeing it based off of their mannerisms and based off of the like symbols that they're giving each other with the rackets and stuff like that. And it is really, really intricate, and I really, really love that. And overall, I think that this entire movie just does such a great job showcasing intimacy and the relationships between all 3 of these characters, because at the end of the day, it seems like one of them is a bad guy and one of them is a good guy, and like their fight over Zendaya was, you know, this person won, so he's the protagonist of the movie. But like you could also kind of see a lot of the sympathy for the other person, why he is the way that he is, and part of the reason why he struggled so much. And I think that they do such a good job of kind of like making us feel empathetic for every single character who's here, and kind of, I don't want to say this, but Zendaya's like almost the bad guy in this movie, and it kind of feels that way for a lot of it. And I think that the ending of this movie, they all kind of come together in a way that is really interesting, and they all kind of like have the love of the game again, and like they're all like at least okay with each other and content with each other. So by the end of the movie, it doesn't really feel like any of them are the bad guys, but there is a solid like, I want to say like maybe 10-15 minutes in the final act that I'm kind of like, Zendaya's character is kind of a bitch. Like, she's kind of sucks. But other than that, I really, really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was great. I think that it did a brilliant job of showcasing sports and the passion for sports. The stuff with Zendaya's character getting an injury and thinking that her life is practically over, they did kind of brush over it a little bit, which I do kind of wish we got a little bit more of that because, like I said earlier, I'm an athlete. Sorry that cut out. I got a phone call. But like I said, I'm an athlete and I'm somebody who played sports for a really, really long time. I always thought that my future was going to involve me going to college on a sports scholarship and I was going to potentially try to be a professional athlete. And then, like Zendaya's character in the movie, there was an injury, stuff happens. It's just kind of life sometimes. But there really is so much like pain and suffering that happens beyond just getting the injury. Like a lot of people will be like, I'm sorry you got injured, hopefully you recover well. But it's like the recovery isn't really about, oh, when my ankle gets better, I'll be okay. It's about those couple of months where you lose all of the progress you've been working towards your entire life. You lose all of that momentum. You lose that love of the sports that you had because once you get back out there, it's a completely different game. You've completely lost so much potential and it takes a really, really long time to kind of shake that rust off. And I was really hoping that with Zendaya's character and her injury, it did a better job showcasing like how it feels to have the one thing that you've been so passionate about your entire life and it not really be an outlet for you anymore. It's not really something you can reach out and like heavily involve yourself with. And it's really heartbreaking. And they do have a couple of really emotional sequences with it. But like I said, I feel like that's something that I wish they highlighted a little bit more. But that being said, overall, I was a pretty big fan of this movie. I think that the ending is fantastic. I think that the literal final scene in the last like 30 seconds are absolutely incredible. I think that the score of this movie is fantastic. I think that the cinematography is great. There's a lot of like inappropriate like makeout sessions and stuff like that I mentioned, and every single one of them feels so cinematically different. Like you'll see so many different shots and they'll focus on different things during different sequences, and it really does a good job of kind of like driving the stakes of the movie because this movie is very passionate and it feels insanely passionate because of the way that they directed things, and I really, really loved it. But yeah, so if I was to give this movie a final score on a scale of 1 to 100, I would probably give it like a 96. It is really damn good. I think that it's relatively close to perfect. It is one of the best movies that has came out this year. But I do, like I said, there are some moments in the final act that I'm like, why is this happening right now? And there's a couple of character decisions that I was like, I couldn't quite get on board with, but I feel like it's just because I personally didn't connect with one individual character in the movie, and I'm not going to hold that against the movie. But yeah, that being said, it's Letterboxd time. That's right, the moment where I talk about my favorite reviews on the Letterboxd app. All I know is be bisexual, eat chips, and lie. Okay, but yeah, I just thought that this one was really funny because there's a sequence, and it's like the one in the trailer where like it seems like, oh my god, they're gonna have like a threesome or something like that, and it's actually just Zendaya tricking them into making out with each other, and like they both seem to have kind of enjoyed it. So maybe they are bisexual. Who knows? And this one's just an ultimate comment. May thy racket chip and shatter. It's just so funny, kind of referencing the Dune final duel. And I will admit, like, the final, like, what's it called? Volley? Is that what it's called in tennis? But, like, the final, like, scene where they're hitting the ball back and forth and back and forth, it does feel very intense, like that final duel in Dune Part 2, which I really... And then this one, Zendaya's collecting White Boys of the Month like they are Infinity Stones. That's hilarious because genuinely, her chemistry with all these white boys has been fantastic, but I just think it's great because it's like Timothée Chalamet, Tom Holland, Mike Faced. They all seem like people who would be white boy of the month, quote unquote. So that's just hilarious. And yeah, now that's it for this video, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and checking it out. I love and appreciate you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, feel free to like and subscribe, and I will hopefully see you guys in the next one. Peace out. Bow.
Back at it again, but that's a relevant flow. So smooth, they calling me Mr. Elegant. Like an elephant, I got a long nose. Like a president, I've got a few hoes. Swift with a stutter, I'm smooth like butter. Don't see it coming when I slip undercover. Like a big dog, but I don't bite. I'm still a big broad, I'd win that fight. Come match you and I knock out your lights.